Another example is Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Ahmad ibn Hanbal will prefer a weak hadith over analogical reasoning, qiyas. He would actually prefer a weak hadith. If he found a weak hadith, he would take that as a ruling before he would use analogical reasoning. Well, the other three imams disagree with that. They say you can't use a weak hadith for a hukm shar'i. And so they all prefer qiyas because they consider qiyas to be stronger, because you're working with a sahih hadith and making qiyas, or an ayah and making analogical reasoning. So their methodologies differ. You also have differences in the Arabic language. Imam Malik radiallahu anhu said in a hadith that came down from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, من أتبع ستة من شوال فكأنه صام الدهر كله أو كما قال. Whoever fasts 6 days from Shawwal, it's as if he fasted the whole year after Ramadan. Well, Imam Malik and Imam Shafi'i differed on what that, and Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu, they differed on what that min meant. Because min in the Arabic language can be a partitive, which is min li-tab'id. It can be min al-ibtida'. It can be min al-bayan. There's different types of min in the Arabic language. So for instance, in the Quran it says, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. Well, what does that min there mean? Does it mean ibtida'an min al-Quran, like أَتَيْتُ مِن مَكَّةَ, I came from Mecca? Or does it mean a portion of the Quran, نُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرآن تَبْعِيضًا, like غُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِكُمْ? What does that min there mean? Is it لِلْبَيَان? Is it لِلْتَبْعِيض? I mean, this is just min. So there's different, and sometimes the ulama differ what it means. So in that case, Imam Malik said that min is ibtida'an. Is ibtida'an. It means min beginning in Shawwal, and so you could fast those 6 days anytime during the year before the next Ramadan, and you got your 6 days. Because he was saying min ash-Shawwal, yani ibtida'an min ash-Shawwal. Whoever fasts beginning with Shawwal until the next Ramadan. The other Imam said, no, that min is lit-tab'id. It has to be from Shawwal. In other words, it has to be part of Shawwal. And you can't say one is wrong and the other's right, because the Arabic grammar, يحتمل الاثنين. In other words, both meanings are encompassed in, and that's the nature of language. Language can mean, there are many possibilities with language. Right? I mean, I can say, Omar came today. I can also say, Omar came today? And those are completely different meanings. But if I read those on a piece of paper, and then Hamza said, Omar came today, and I didn't have some type of adverb to indicate to you, questioningly, or shockingly, or whatever, to let you know. So in the hadith, we don't know sometimes how things were actually said. It's not always clarified, and things become ambiguous. And that's where you get the nature of trying to understand. That's what the imams are doing. They're trying to understand what exactly is being said here. And basically, many of them differed, and over a period of time, certain imams and the schools that they followed became accepted as canonical or authoritative by the ummah. Now, just to give you an example of Imam Malik, because a lot of people get very confused about certain things. Imam Malik considered it makruh to fast the first 6 days after the Eid in Shawwal. It's actually makruh in his madhab. Now people say, how could it be makruh when the hadith says, whoever fasts 6 days, أتبع رمضان بستة من شوال, you follow Ramadan by 6 days from Shawwal, how could it be makruh? Imam Malik had a principle in his madhab that if he felt that people would think that something was a sunnah mu'akkada or a wajib, he would actually consider it makruh, because he had a principle of what was called مخافة اعتقاد الوجوب, out of fear that people will believe something is an obligation. Because if you believe something's an obligation that's a sunnah, it's a bid'ah. And so you actually become mubtadi'. And he feared for people's understanding in certain things because ignorant people. Things, and people that aren't capable. I mean, somebody came to me and said, brother, you know, you shouldn't tell people to follow Madhab. And then I said, well, I mean, that's what I was taught, that you should follow Madhab. And he said, no, you should tell them to follow the Quran and the Sunnah. And then, first of all, that's called ta'an fi a'immatina. I mean, it's saying that Abu Hanifa didn't follow the Quran and Sunnah, that Imam Malik didn't follow the Quran and Sunnah. I mean, it's basically saying that these people weren't following the Quran and Sunnah. And then it becomes, well, no, they were, but they weren't always right. And I accept that. That's why Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu is corrected many times by his students, Shaybani and Abu Yusuf. I mean, they actually correct, they don't agree with their teacher. There's Malikis that don't agree with Imam Malik from his students. And then you have all these centuries of scholars going over and looking at the dalils again and again and doing it. So you're not talking about an individual. When you say Maliki or Shafi'i or Hanafi, it's a school. That's what people don't understand. It's a school of a large group of scholars, that what they're all accepting is the methodology of the school. That's the difference. And the methodologies differ. So for instance, the methodology of Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu is that he will not take solitary transmissions over a principle in his madhab. And that's why even if a hadith is sahih, he will leave it when it's overridden by a principle with him. And that's why there's a hadith that says a non-Muslim is not killed a Muslim is not killed for a non-Muslim. If a Muslim kills a non-Muslim, he's not killed for it. He can be punished, he can pay the diya, but he's not actually killed for it. There's a hadith that says that, and that's the position of Imam Malik and Imam Shafi'i. Abu Hanifa said that goes against the Quranic principle of musawat and dam. And he said, I'm not going to take a solitary transmission that goes against a principle. So he considered that if a Muslim killed a non-Muslim, and he did it unjustly, that he was killed for that. And that's his, and you can't say that's wrong and the other ones are right because the hadith says that. No, he knew the hadith. But he did not accept a solitary transmission in that case. And there are many examples of that. Another thing is Imam Malik radiallahu anhu considered the actions of the people of Medina, the scholars of Medina, who were tabi'een. He had 900 shuyukh, Imam Malik. He studied with 900 teachers. 600 of them were tabi'een. He considered, and these are people that met the Sahaba. One of his closest teachers was somebody who spent decades with Ibn Umar. And we know that Abdullah ibn Umar was one of the most rigorous in following or adhering to the Sunnah of the Prophet. Well, Imam Malik took directly from Nafi', who was the servant of Ibn Umar. He actually served him. So Imam Malik radiallahu anhu considered that the actions of the people of Medina, if they agreed on something, because he was living with people that lived with Sahaba, thousands of people, he considered if they agreed on something, that would override a sound hadith. So Imam Malik, for instance, there is a hadith that says that the Prophet, it's in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet, Naha Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ana siyam yawm al-jumu'ah. The Prophet prohibited fasting on Friday. Imam Malik said, I saw all of the virtuous men of the city fasting on Friday. And I'm not going to take a solitary transmission of a hadith that one man narrates and leave what I'm seeing hundreds of scholars in this city doing who lived with the Sahaba, and they were doing that practice when the Sahaba were alive, and the Sahaba didn't tell them, don't fast on Friday. So Imam Malik considered Friday a virtuous day to fast. Not because he didn't know the hadith, and that's why somebody said, Ya akhi, al-hadith. And Imam Malik said, كُلُّ قَوْلٍ يُؤْخَذُ مِنْهُ وَيُرَدْ إِلَّا قَوْلُ صَاحِبِ الْمَقَامِ. Every word is taken from and left except the word of this Prophet. Imam Malik knew, he said that. He's the one that said that. And yet, he leaves many, many hadiths. Imam Malik, Ibn al-Qasim said that, Ibn Wahb radiallahu anhu said that had it not been for Malik, I would have been destroyed, because I memorized so many hadith until I became confused. And then he said, and then I went to Malik, and I would tell him the hadith, and he said, ليس العمل على هذا الحديث. That hadith is not, there's no practice in that hadith. And he'd say, خذ هذا حديث, دع هذا حديث. And he would tell him. And Ibn al-Qasim radiallahu anhu, when he went into the house of Malik, he found stacks of hadith that Malik never related. And he said, Rahimukallah, this was after Imam Malik died, he said, Rahimukallah, Aba Abdillah, Aradta Allah bi'ilmika, you wanted Allah with your knowledge. Because Imam Malik was somebody once came to him and said, recite this hadith to me. And he said, I don't recite that hadith. And the man said, Ibn Uyayna recites it. There's another muhaddith at Malik's time. And Imam Malik radiallahu anhu said that it's enough to consider a man insane that relates everything he hears. And he wasn't speaking about Ibn Uyayna, he was speaking about himself. That he related hadith according to what he felt the action was on. And sometimes he related hadith to show that he knew the hadith but still didn't practice it. So people couldn't say, oh, he must not have known the hadith. So he actually relates hadith that he didn't consider the action to be in accordance with. And so Imam Malik was very focused on action, and he would leave solitary transmissions. And what I mean by solitary, in the hadith methodology, the hadiths are broadly divided into two categories, mutawatir and ahad. Mutawatir is a hadith that there's a difference of opinion of how many is needed, but generally 10 is the number. Some go as far as 50. But what it means is that in every generation there are at least 10 separate chains of transmission. So there had to be 10 Sahaba, there had to be 10 Tabi'een, and so usually they go exponential. If there's 10 Sahaba, there'll be hundreds of Tabi'een that relate it. That's usually the way it works. But the point of the Mutawatir is they say that those 10 Sahaba could not have come together and said, let's fabricate a hadith together. Because all of the Sahaba are considered udul. So maybe we could say that maybe one Sahabi fabricated a hadith or thought the Prophet ﷺ said something. I mean, even just iftiradan, we could say that, just theoretically. Maybe one Sahabi did do that. But 10 Sahaba who are known to be just and upright and had belief in Allah and His Messenger and knew that the Prophet said in a mutawatir hadith that over 50 Sahaba relate, whoever says a hadith that's fabricated and claims that I said it, let him take his seat in the hellfire. That hadith is mutawatir. So all the Sahaba knew that hadith. So you cannot say that 10 Sahaba are going to risk going to hell by fabricating a hadith. So that's considered a mutawatir hadith. That hadith is very strong. But I'll give you an example of a mutawatir hadith. In the prayer, there's a tawatur that the Prophet ﷺ in each, when he would come out of ruku', he would do the rafa' al-yadayn. Right? Now that is related, and Imam Malik radiallahu anhu actually relates that. In Imam Malik's Madhab, he didn't raise his hands, because the amal of the people of Medina was not in accordance with that. Ibn Abdul Barr, who actually preferred the position of raising the hands, he actually considered that to be a stronger position. Ibn Abdul Barr radiallahu anhu was asked by somebody, why don't you raise your hands in prayer? Because you consider it to be a stronger position. And he said, لا أريد أن أخالف أصحابي في أمر فيه سعة. I don't want to go against my peers, meaning the other Maliki ulama, in a matter that has sa'a. It's not really, it's not he didn't consider it important enough for him, because it's from hay'at as-salah. It's not like a sunnah, it's from the hay'ah. In other words, it's if you left it, you don't have to do sahu, something like that. It doesn't have the strength of that. So he just felt that it was better to not go against the majority of people in that matter. And that was his position. So, because they had principles in their madhab that they considered higher than singular narration. See, when you have singular narrations, the probability of error increases. So, for instance, Imam Malik, there's a hadith about the qullatayn, about the khabath, right? لا يحمل الخبث إذا بلغ الماء قلتين. And in the Shafi'i madhab, the Shafi'i madhab, they take that, right? Imam Malik didn't take that because the rawi, the sahabi that narrated that, was not from the fuqaha of the sahaba. And he considered it that if, as long as the water has not changed in one of the three, see, for Imam Shafi'i it had to get to a certain level before you'd consider it pure. Whereas Imam Malik, he said no, as long as the three basic things didn't change. So he knew the hadith, but he didn't take it because of a illah in the hadith. And that science is a very difficult science in hadith, of determining why hadiths are taken or not. So a hadith can be sound, but it can have weaknesses that you don't recognize because you're not at the level of recognizing. Whereas Imam Malik, he preferred the position of the people of Medina because that was an ahad hadith, and the man that related, there are two men that related, neither of them were considered to be among the fuqaha of the sahaba. Do you see? So he would actually look at the rawi, the hal of the rawi, and there are many examples like that. And so Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu had a principle of not taking, he would need two sound hadiths. Isn't that correct, Imam Jamal? He wanted two sound hadiths to override a principle, right? Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu. Yeah. So he wanted something had to be of the same level. So the only thing that, if you have a Quranic principle, the only thing that's going to override a Quranic principle is a mutawatir hadith amongst the usulis. Because a mutawatir hadith has the same level as the Quran in its strength. And then you have what's called mutlaq, muqayyad, and am and khas. You have, in usul, there are hadiths that are mutlaq, which means they are applicable. And then you have a hadith that are only applicable to specific situations. So for instance, there's a hadith about the, khams mushbi'at in the radha'a, which Imam Shafi'i took. So you needed to have a child would have to suck 5 times, and they would be enough that the child didn't want the breast anymore. Imam Malik didn't take that. He said that al-massa al-wahida is enough. And that was the practice of the people. So there are many examples like that, of the hadith. And it's not rejecting the hadith. I mean, you can't see it as they're rejecting something the Prophet ﷺ said, hashahum. They would never reject anything the Prophet. Don't think that they're rejecting the Prophet's hadith. But what they're saying is that the hadith is not strong enough for them to leave another proof that they have, even though the proof might not be a hadith.
Is it kind of like looking at it as this is parallel to something that's not
Well, no. That the probability of error, or the probability, for Imam Malik, what he's saying is the practice that the majority of scholars in Medina are doing, They're doing it because that's what they found the Sahaba doing. The Sahaba would not have been doing it had it not been accepted practice, because too many of them are doing it. So if he has a hadith in which maybe 2 or 3 Sahabi relate it, he's not going to leave the practice for an isolated hadith, because he considers that practice to be a stronger proof of what the Prophet ﷺ was teaching. So he's seeing that as a hadith. The Amal of Ahl al-Medina has more force than an ahad hadith. Alright, that's what it is. And now, when Imam Shafi'i said, إِذَا صَحَ الْحَدِيث فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي, that's true. If the hadith is sound, that's my madhab. But that's within the context of his usul. Abu Hanifa would agree, but the hadith has to have the strength that he has stipulated before he's going to leave a Quranic principle. Do you see? I mean, it's a difference in usul. It's not a difference in basic understanding. The Prophet, whatever he says, على العين ورأس. But when we have what's called ta'arud al-adillah, you know, when proofs are, when you have different understandings, or you have 2 hadiths that say the opposite things, they might have the same rutbah of sahha, the same rank of soundness. The faqih is going to look and determine what other factors are involved here. The first thing he tries to do is make a tawafuq. He tries to find some way of making them agree with each other. So this one's mutlaq, this one's muqayyad. You know, in this hadith it was speaking about a general thing, but here it's a specific circumstance. So he might try to find that. Or he might say, this is abrogated, because the Prophet ﷺ said this in the 2nd year of Hijrah, and this one's, he said, in the 7th year of Hijrah, and so this abrogates that. That's what he's going to be looking at. He's going to be looking at that. And the same is true with the linguistic aspect of it, of interpreting it from language. You know, and I was telling you about that man who said to me, you should be following the Quran and Sunnah. And so I just said to him, look, first of all, the only way you know the Quran is from the Rijal. I don't care what you tell me. The only way that you know that Allah said something is because the Quran is mutawatir, transmitted by men and women. That's the only way we know the Quran. And so if I'm ignorant and some person comes up to me and makes up a verse and says it's in the Quran, and he speaks very eloquent Arabic and I don't speak Arabic, how do I know that's not in the Quran? I'm not a hafiz, I don't understand Arabic, and this and that. He can just lead me astray, right? So the way we know the Quran is because of the mutawatir transmission of the Quran. The hadith, the only way we know the hadith is through men like Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Abu Hanifa. That's the only way that we know the hadith is men like that. And so then it becomes, you know, who do you follow? I mean, that's basically it. Do you follow your opinion? Do you follow, with all due respect, do you follow the opinion of Shaykh so-and-so, living in the 20th or the 21st century or the 15th century Hijrah, and leave the opinion of, you know, 1,000 of the greatest scholars of the Ummah? I mean, seriously, that's the question. Are you going to follow? I mean, okay, I could write a book, the prayer of the Prophet as if you see it, right? And Hamza Yusuf, I've got all 9 collections in my library, and I go through all the hadiths that are in the Sahih, and I try to work out how did the Prophet ﷺ pray? And so I write my little book, and then I put it out, and then there's people who happen to like me. And they'll say, oh, that's Hamza's book on how the Prophet prayed. And then they read it, and then they start praying like that. Now, does that make sense to do that? Or to pray, how did Abu Hanifa learn his prayer? Abu Hanifa actually met Sahaba. He met hundreds of ulama from the Tabi'een. And they met thousands of Sahaba. They saw them pray. I mean, I prayed with Murabb al-Hajj for a year, and I can tell you exactly how he prays. Literally, to every single detail. I can tell you exactly how he moves his forefinger, because I watched. I can tell you exactly how he makes wudu, because I wanted to see how he did it, right? Now, you don't think Imam Malik, who's living in Medina with people who lived and served the Sahaba, he's not looking at how they prayed? I mean, so you're looking at somebody who saw Ibn Omar pray and served him for 20 years. And he's your teacher. And you're going to tell me that it's a prayer of somebody writing 1400 years later from books. And he's going to show you how the Prophet ﷺ prayed. Seriously, think about that. I mean, he's going to show you how the Prophet prayed. When those people saw people praying who saw the Prophet ﷺ pray. And the Prophet, what did he say? Sallu kama ra'aytumuni.
People come up with the argument, for example, when he was in Iraq, he did not have all these, it's never recent.
Right. Well, the Imam, Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayya said in a series of lectures that he gave in California, he said it's our belief that the Imams knew all of the hadiths that relate to the ahkam. And there's only about 500 of them that actually deal with ahkam. There's not that many hadiths. And these men spent their entire lives. Imam Malik lived 92 years. And he was giving fatwa at the age of 17 in Medina. And he was living at a time when everybody went to Medina during their Hajj. So the idea that, I mean, here's a man who memorized over 100,000 hadith. And Imam Malik would only memorize sound hadith, even though he had literally hundreds of thousands of hadith in his personal collection. So the idea that they didn't know those 500 basic hadiths of ahkam is just a total absurdity. It really is. Even though Imam Malik, out of modesty, did say, although Qadhi Iyad challenges the narration, he did say, when he was asked by Abu Mansur to make the Muwatta the official book of the entire Ummah, like the Quran, it would be the Hadith book, and he said, no, the Sahaba spread out and took with them knowledges that might not have come to us. So he was leaving that possibility open, and that possibility is there. There might be some hadiths that they didn't know. But the overwhelming majority, they certainly did. And their scholars who came after them did make those corrections and redresses. I mean, by the time the great scholars of the Madhabs were working, and I'm talking about in the Shafi'i Madhab, Imam Nawawi, who kind of finishes off the Madhab in terms of just making a complete statement of the Madhab. Imam Nawawi, to say that he didn't know all of the hadiths in ahkam is a total, it's just a lie. I mean, he knew all of the hadiths related to ahkam. And certainly Ibn Abdul Barr in the Maliki Madhab knew all of the hadiths. He memorized over 100,000 by rote, and he knew all of the hadiths of ahkam. And by that time, al-Bukhari, all the great collections had been done. By the time people like Qadhi Iyad and Ibn Abdul Barr, they were the transmitters of those collections. So the idea that they didn't know the hadiths, I mean, that's just, these are really these modern red herrings that are put out by people that are just dissembling. I don't think they're doing it wittingly, and don't get me wrong. I think a lot of these people are very sincere, but they really don't know the tradition. I'm not saying they're doing it on purpose, but they are ignorant, and their arguments are very superficial arguments. I mean, that's in reading them and looking at them myself. I mean, there's one argument that's always brought up that they say, وَأَحْمَدْ بْنْ حَنْبَلْ قَالَ مِنْ قِلَّةِ عِلْمِ الْمَرْءِ أَنْ يُقَلِّدَ غَيْرَهُ فِي دِينِهِ. from the lack of knowledge that a man has in this religion is that he imitates others in his religion. And they use that as this kind of attack on taqleed, and yet that is the very proof of taqleed. And that's what's so strange to me, that you can't see that that is exactly why you are muqallid, because you don't have any knowledge. So to use that as a proof for not making taqleed is to basically be telling us that you're an alim. And this man who told me to follow the book and the sunnah, I asked him one thing. I said, tell me one thing. When Allah says, hiya hatta matla' al-fajr, about Laylat al-Qadr, what kind of hatta is that? You know, and he just looked at me with a blank stare. And I said, because does that include Fajr, or is it up to but not including Fajr? Because there's two types of hatta in that situation. There's actually 17 types of hatta in Arabic. But in that situation, there's two types. You can say, أكلت السمكة حتى رأسها, or أكلت السمكة حتى رأسها. And based on what that hatta, is that a hatta in which what follows it is mansub, or is that a hatta in which what follows it is majroor, and it's going to change the meaning? So you tell me. If you know that it's majroor, tell me what it means. Is it hiya hatta matla' al-fajr, including fajr, or up until but not including fajr? And he couldn't answer that question. I said, that's one harf in the Quran, and you can't tell me what it means. So why should I trust that you can understand what hadith means? I mean, the fa in the Arabic language. There's a lot of types of fa in the Arabic language. I mean, is it like when the Quran says, فَعِظُوهُمْ وَهَجُرُوهُمْ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ وَضْرِبُوهُمْ, right? You tell me what the fa is there, and then what are those wows? Is it wow and nisq? Is it wow for hel al-wal yufidu tartib? I mean, you know, these are things that these people don't know. So why should I follow the Quran and the Sunnah directly, and I don't know what the Quran and the Sunnah is actually saying? Because I don't know Arabic, and I don't know Arabic. I don't know Arabic at the level of a person who's capable of doing ijtihad. I mean, I can read books and I understand. I've studied grammar, but I don't know. If you ask me how many types of hatta, I know there's 17 because I've seen what Ibn Hisham in Mughni al-Labib says. There's 17 types of hatta. If you ask me now to enumerate them, I can't do it. I could give you maybe 4 or 5 different types of hatta in the Arabic language, but all 17, I can't enumerate them. But if my Shaykh was here, Abdullah Wad Ahmedna, he could tell you all 17. And Murab al-Hajj could, you know, that's like Fatiha for him. It's not,